Welcome back to another episode of Success and the Rest. It's been a little while, but we have another guest, Jordi Wills, joining us today from Wills Transfer. And I'm excited because we have done some work in the past together. And you guys have also been a sponsor on one of our abroad trips, which was awesome, working with World Hope abroad. So give us a little bit of context into who you are, and then we're going to jump all the way back from being a kid and working up to your current role and where you see success in your life.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I grew up in Smiths Falls, and we're like 7 or 8 I think I'm 7th generation to the Smiths Falls area, more specifically Lombardy, Rideau Ferry. So we moved back 11 years ago, and it's just great to be back. So our head office for our company's in Smiths Falls. I can tell a little bit about the company.
Definitely.
Overview. Yeah. Wills Transfer. We're 4th generation. I just took over, succeeded my father at the beginning of the year. A long-awaited and excellent runway I had with my father. I've got lots of things to share about some of the learnings from getting to work closely with him. But it's just a very exciting time because I have thought long and hard about this, and I feel that in this particular time, and for my wife and I, Heidi, that this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be building a business, building upon the values that have already been instilled in the business, to build upon that, to grow it, and to continue to offer people meaningful employment where they, number one, they feel part of a team. Number two, they're valued as a person, and just simply that we walk the walk when it comes to taking care of people. So I feel both the weight of that, but I also feel, because of how the business is structured today, I also feel some relief of that, believe it or not, which sounds weird in your first year as president to feel relief when it comes to taking care of people, but there's some really good things in play, really good people in play. So I grew up, I worked as a missionary for 4 years with my wife. We were overseas in East Asia for a year.
Whereabouts? Which
was a very, very influential time for my wife and I, both from our marriage and growing as people, starting developing some serious personal development during that time. We were in a closed country in East Asia.
Oh, okay.
And we went in as students because you can't go in under a Christian organization. So we went there and we learned the local East Asian language.
Nice.
It's a large country in East Asia. If you're trying to guess. And so we got involved in Carleton in a club called Power to Change, Christian movement about making disciples of Jesus on university campuses. We really enjoyed it. It impacted our lives significantly. It changed the trajectory of our lives, our time at Carleton University. She was doing psychology. I was doing business. We got involved. We ended up joining that organization as staff. We asked to go to East Asia, and that was approved. So we did a year in East Asia. While we were there, two amazing things happened. One of them was our marriage hit a rock bottom, and then we got pregnant.
Wow.
So those two things, we decided not to stay there, and we moved back to Canada. And we had the option of going to the University of Calgary or the University of Guelph. We chose Guelph because we needed family somewhat close during a challenging time in our life. So we got placed at the University of Guelph, and we were there for 3 years. And then 11 years ago last month, we moved back to Smiths Falls. And then I got involved working the family business. And then my wife Heidi joined me 2 years later. She joined me 2 years ago. So 9 years later, after our kids were in school. We have 4 kids. Noelle who's 13, Eden who's 11, Blythe who's 9, and Sterling who's 7. So now that they're all in school, Heidi joined me in the business, and so that was another brand new territory for us. Her being involved in a family business, and so yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we don't have to dig too far into it, but going back with the difficulties part in marriage.
Yeah.
So what are some of those things that kind of you guys had to struggle through, pound through? What was some of the context in that?
I think number one, you take for granted, if you have healthy family situations, you take that for granted. And sooner or later in your marriage, if you've really relied on those friendships and family relationships, and you haven't really faced face the music. Face the music, and done it alone. And when I mean do it alone, I mean you are not going to go to other people and talk about your spouse. Like that's, you can cross that line early, or you can cross that line later, but sooner or later you're going to have to not go and kind of run off in a sense, but to deal with it just with your wife. So that happened to us. We didn't even see this coming because everything was just so new. We did get married as students, so we were fourth year we got married. Wow. I had an extra year to do, and she decided to do this 12-month master's program. So I was finishing my fifth year at Carleton, and she did a master's in applied language studies. So we were married. And I would say it kind of started during that time, like just how you react to everything from bills to how you spend your time and who does what. Just, I think we accelerated things because we got married young, which she was 21, I was 22. So the first 3 years, I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
in terms of what's challenging and communication. And so anyways, when we were in East Asia, every sort of comfort, any sort of escape, any sort of thing that you would lean on was gone. So for me, hockey in the gym, those were gone, and buddies and family. Then in addition to that, the other stressors we were now working on a team, and we were the only married couple on the team. So there was dynamics surrounding that. So we hadn't worked before. Now we're in a full-time vocation. So now we're working together. And then we can't speak the language yet. So it's just like, basically I could have never put this together on the Canadian side, but when we were in East Asia, you realize how successful, and I don't mean that like popularity, how successful you were in Canada, how easy it was to do things, how much you take for granted friendships. And then when those things are stripped away, and then there's hard times, I think some of the, some character came out on my end that I had never seen before, and it manifested itself in anger. So I felt anger, both not being successful in school, not being successful in marriage, not feeling super successful in the team. So it's just like a triple header.
When you said that it surprised you, is that one of those things where you're like in the act of doing things and you're like, this isn't me, or like how did that kind of manifest in you? Probably
embarrassed, because you know that sort of behavior is not appropriate.
Yeah.
Whether it's yelling or actually just feeling angry.
Yeah.
And you just know that that's not going to contribute to, you just know that there's something wrong with that, at least for me. I remember getting angry like once or twice in hockey, but I feel very like I was very even keel. Like I could count the times that I got angry, like in my teenage years leading up till 20. So I didn't like that behavior, and I wasn't proud of it. And I knew that that's not how you have a successful relationship, is when there's anger involved. I think a number of things happened that year, but one of them was, and it was a godsend, meaning we didn't know what to do. We just knew that we were having problems communicating, just feeling successful as a couple. The smallest things were bugging us and causing fights. There was another staff member there, and his name was Rome, and Rome was from Singapore, and he said, I'd like you to consider meeting with this lady. And so there was an American lady. She grew up in Pennsylvania. She was in a city close to us in East Asia. We took a nighttime train where like they're stacked 3 high. And I remember being on the top bunk and like headed there on an overnight train to go visit this lady, because we had marriage problems. So it was, there's a lot there to process in another country. Now there were some fun moments, like being on that train. Like I'll never forget those moments of being on a cram train, trying to sleep on the way to East Asia, not knowing when your stop's coming, so that you don't miss it. You don't oversleep. Yeah. So anyways, we went there. Her name was Sue, and she was a godsend. And wherever your faith is at, she was given very specific questions, whether it's from herself and experience or from God, to ask us questions about our childhood. And it started a journey of thinking of learning about ourselves.
Yep.
And also learning about potential lies that you can believe growing up about who you are, like your worth, which were manifesting itself. And so, for example, like we're in a coffee shop in her city, and like 20 minutes into the conversation, she asked me if I felt abandoned as a kid. And everything inside of me, like I just started to defend my childhood, because I saw my parents make sacrifices for me. I would say they were above average in love, both in physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time. Like I felt all those things were there. So all I wanted to do was defend. But then all of a sudden there was like 2 or 3 times that came right to mind where I remember where, for whatever circumstances, I was the last to be picked up. And it was those conversations, whatever happened whatever it was, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, whatever you hear at that time about your importance, you don't realize that it can affect you. So that's just an example of something that was started to unpack in our journey. So one of the things was abandonment, which it was a bizarre weird word to hear and to start thinking through. And so she gave us some things to think through, conversations to have. She gave us some things to memorize, and just started giving us tools. And then we went back a few more times, and just that was really the start for Heidi and I to reflect on who we were, our own personal faith, and how that relates to who we are and what defines success. One of the things so this is back in 2009. One of the things she said to me was, "Jordi, are you okay with people not being okay with you?" And I wanted to have a great answer. I'm like, yeah, I don't care what people think. Anyone who says I don't care what people think of me, like, come on. Yes, there are a few people in a few circumstances that really believe that. But in the moment, I was like, I am absolutely not okay if people are okay with me. And I have spent my whole life trying to be charming or funny, because if I feel a relationship is not where it needs to be, then I will work to try and win that over.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, no, I am not okay if people are not okay with me. So what does that mean for when your wife doesn't agree with you? Like she doesn't agree with your idea. She's not on board. I'm like, I'm sporadic. I'm like, let's go do this. And she's like, no, I don't think we should do that for these reasons. And I wasn't used to that. And so that started a journey too, of being like, well, who am I if people, don't like your idea? What if people don't love you? And, so these were some of the things that were starting to come to the surface. And we would have been married a year and a half. So we were 24 years old, and started this journey of discovering the past, and also a proactive plan to deal with the past and deal with the future. So
are you, would you consider yourself, we'll say in this current moment now, a pretty self-aware person?
Yeah, I think we talk from a leadership standpoint. We talk about self-awareness because we see the negative and positive impacts of seeing people in our organization in self-awareness. So yeah, I would say I think about it a lot. There will be times where I actually do a little bit of writing to say, how did that go? The interesting thing about self-awareness is, A, if you think you're self-aware, and B, you're a confident person, put those two things together. And my parents gave me so much confidence by their words of affirmation, physical touch, hugs, whatever, and quality time. When you have that sort of confidence, my wife laughs at me for that, for how I score for confidence. When you put that and you think you're self-aware, then there's a danger there. And I would say that in 2023, I had a lower moment kind of in the last decade. In November of 2023, some things came to a head where I thought I was doing everything right, but there was some gaps for sure. And those gaps were, I turned from both a fun and serious person to a serious person. And people could feel a pressure around me. And I had begun to do some micromanaging. And so if you had asked me, I would have said, yeah, my team loves me, I'm doing great, self-aware. But actually, I didn't have awareness on that until Thankfully, there was 3 people specifically that talked to me through different
good.
conversations. Yeah. So self-aware, we talk about it a lot, and I love chatting with people about it from a coaching perspective, because self-aware goes, in my mind, Mitch, goes 2 routes. One of them is like overanalyzation leads to how do I maximize people liking me? And then there's self-aware with like what's appropriate in the moment, what's the goal, what has to get done, and then what was my tone and body language, there. So it can kind of go 2 different paths, and I do like talking and coaching people on that other path. So self-awareness, yeah. What about you? Can I put that one back to you?
Sure. I think sort of kind of like what you said, back in high school and through part of university, at the beginning of university especially was when I started realizing that like the self-awareness piece, I always had enough self-awareness almost subconsciously on certain areas. Like, for example, I always known academia was never going to be the thing that took me anywhere. Never took my education for granted, but I was self-aware enough to know this isn't what's going to make me potentially successful, whatever that definition is, which at the time I didn't know. Then moving forward, there was a part kind of through university where I'd say like my self-awareness was in a similar situation to what you said, where it's like, okay, I'm running some of my own businesses. I'm self-aware, knowing that I am confident. I am self-aware. I'm good at these 5 skills and I can do something big with it. But it wasn't necessarily in a fully healthy, developed way, especially when you're talking about management and how you interact with other people.
Right.
It's, I probably haven't thought about that enough going back to it yet.
Yeah.
And then kind of moving forward into now, I think I'm getting into a spot where now, as we've got other people working in the business, and we've had 2 other kind of people who were working here beforehand. And when I look at those, one of them left for maternity. One of them had another job offer down in the States. And it wasn't like neither of them were like, from as far as I know, they weren't leaving because of me.
But was there, on the maternity one though, was there a baby?
Well, there was, yes. that was not my problem. Like when I look back at how some of those early days of what management kind of looked like at a small level, I mean, yours is very different, right? You're managing tons of people. Mine's just like 2 or 3. And even in that, understanding how much time it was eating up for me, and also was I actually setting them up for success to be the best that they possibly could. I don't necessarily think I was at the time, but as you kind of know, in the C-suite or the entrepreneurial or the whatever, those roles, those things I kind of view, those failures are actually successes to me, because I have learned so much from those first couple management things, and what's currently going on with our employees here. I'm learning so much of, okay, is the way that I'm actually handling this situation a beneficial way? And like you said, body language, all those things, it makes such a big difference in setting people up to be the best that they can be. So it's a delicate balance. I would say overall, I am a pretty self-aware person, and I am a confident person. So like based off of what you're saying, I probably need to be
combo.
Yeah, but I probably need to be a little more, like you said before, writing out a journal or like doing something that's looking back at the end of a week or a days or whatever and saying, did this actually go as well as I think it really did? Because I think it's pretty easy to get caught in that trap of, I have some other entrepreneurial friends that they kind of boast or inflate things. I think that things are going well more than what they actually are on paper. And that's a part that I think I'm pretty good at now, understanding like, saying that it's actually kind of a tough time right now is an okay thing. Not everybody's sitting at the clouds at all times, So
yeah, that part, and I agree, that part comes easy for me, is saying how things are actually going. And not overinflating. I think one of the turning points for me in self-reflection was when I was involved in that student Christian movement at Carleton. I had someone who discipled me for 2 years. And that was probably one of the most like I said, university was such a pivotal time for both Heidi and I. We both had people who were mentoring us, Christian term of discipling. And he would ask a lot of questions, like simply like, how do you think that went? How do you think that person took, like just questions, right? And I would say that was part of it. When you have someone that's going to ask you questions, how do you think that went? That's a very basic question, but can start a conversation about how you think it went for you, how you think it went for that person in that conversation, and then also how do you think where might this go from here? So yeah, that started, I think, that self-reflection journey. The other piece for me, Mitch, was that, and it's kind of self-awareness, it's also kind of work mentality, or how I approach work, was that when I was growing up and moving furniture, we were a moving company before we became basically an all commercial third-party logistics. We used to have a moving division for 60 years. And so my summers from 13 to 20 were moving furniture. I became a truck driver when I was 16, and then I got my full tractor trailer AZ license when I was 18. Got to drive across Canada a few times. And
nice.
A lot of character was developed there. But I remember the feeling of being teased as the boss's son and work ethic. And I think that started two things. One healthy, one slightly unhealthy. One healthy was, may not be fair, but work hard, because it doesn't matter how hard people won't give you those compliments that you'll get because of who you are, the boss's son. So you've got a target on your back, work hard, leave as little room as possible as you can for this sort of criticism.
Not doing the trust fund baby thing where you sit back
right.
and collect.
Yeah. But then also that one can spin off, and then you do spend time caring about perception. And there's multiple moments over the last 11 years, like coming back in a professional setting, in a more professional role. In 2013, there's been lots of moments annually where you were like, oh, I do care a lot what people think. And that's leading to a little bit of unhealthy behavior to try and manage people's perception. Yep. So the whole kid thing and being the boss's son and like trying to prove myself was good from a work ethic standpoint. It does create some challenges from how am I perceived by everyone right now, and thinking a lot about that. So
you've touched on it a little bit, but I actually want to jump back again to more of like childhood, high school.
Yeah.
Asking a similar question with self-awareness. Where were you on self-awareness, and were you, like, when you look at it now, were you the cool kid? Were you a nerd? Were you like, what were you
what was high school?
Coming up, and how do you think other people perceived you at that point?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought about this before, like your self-awareness journey as a teenager, but I was very much defined by who I was with and what they said about me. It was very, very little understanding who my identity is and what I'm confident in what I think I bring to the table, right? It's more about what people think and where you rank kind of in high school. And
for sure.
Small town high school, like I'm thinking I have my oldest is going to be in high school, and she's just finishing grade 7. So
oh, wow.
You start thinking about those years again. Yeah. Right? Like I still remember the first day of high school, just the insecurity and like probably spending more, not that I had hair to do. I ended up wearing a backwards hat that day, but you end up spending a lot of time on you because you're thinking a lot about me. Sorry. I spent a lot of time thinking about me, and not everyone's like that. High school was, the first year of high school was challenging. There was a bit of a social issue with some people, and so I would say I was double insecure, but really looking to get rid of that and join the popular crowd in sports and that sort of thing. So I had lots of insecurities in grade 9. But one of the things that happened was when you play sports and you're associated with different things, you can get it's not necessarily accurate, but you can get respect from others. And so I craved that. I craved respect. And the small town high school is not necessarily the best. There was a tough mentality. And I think that comes through sports and having some rival towns. And I associated myself with guys that were older than me, and they were tough. But it also it also affected me a fair bit. So for example, their view on women in relationships, that affected my view of women. Their view on what's a man, basically, that affected me. Their view on kind of sports being respected, recognition. So some phenomenal people, and not looking to take anything back, but you talk about trajectories in university, how much positive trajectory there was being set. In high school was, I would say, a very fun time, but not totally real life. One of those examples would be when the older guys would say they would say to me, "You have it made, you have nothing to worry about." And we have a trucking and warehousing company, and so there would be trucks going through town, like you'd see a truck go by, and they'd associate that with like success, probably financial success. Like you think of the limited male's mind as 17, it's just an association with success, and that's not necessarily true. Like but you believe it because of who they are. So you believe these things to be true about you, that you have nothing to worry about. Like what a place to be where you've now defined success as, when I'm associated with cool, tough people who view women like this, and they're telling me that I have it made, I have nothing to worry about. So a real false sense of identity. Yep. And I don't have any resentment to that. That's just what was happening like in high school.
Of course.
And I love those guys and love those experiences. I moved away to Calgary though. When I was 18, I got accepted to this college program in Calgary. And while I was there, that's when things started to make a little bit of sense about high school and like where you find your identity. So I'm in a new city where nobody knows you. Nobody knows the family business, who your dad is, who your uncle is, what you've
Fresh
done.
Start.
Yeah. And I spent the first few months acting with the sort of behavior that would want a lot of attention. And at some point in that year, I realized that to be true to myself, if I act this way to get people to like me, to go back to what it was like in Smiths Falls, I won't be true to myself. I'll be acting. And I just don't like who this is making me become. And so, ironically, at the same time, this was actually a Bible college. Leading up to that, my life really had nothing to do with the Bible college. And I ended up there. It was a bit of a miracle. My dad asked me to go. I told my parents that I wanted to go and do another year of high school, play football, and then go work at a ski hill in the winter. Like probably the worst thing you want to hear from your teenager about their plan. Like go waste time playing high school and then go work at a ski hill. Like, yeah. But in all my parents' like love and their patience and their wisdom, they didn't react to that. They just kind of paused, and then they're like, well, what if you got something more out of the year and you went out to, my sister was going to that school. Why don't you go out and do their 1 year program? That way you can be close to the mountains. And I was like, sure. There's
my ticket.
Right. Yeah. Even though like I didn't even consider the fact that I was going to go learn about Christianity until Saskatchewan. Like we were driving out and I like see a sign for Alberta, and then it starts to click of what's ahead of me in the next year. So it's kind of a very interesting number of events that led me to that. So, and then that was a really forming year for myself, which led to me coming back, getting accepted at Carleton, and then finding this Christian club on campus, which I'd say was part of helping change the trajectory of my life in terms of what I wanted to live for, to get rid of some of the selfishness, to think about some of the bigger questions in life and why we're here, and just a whole bunch of really neat stuff with this group at Carleton. So, and I'm not even in touch with anyone today, but like so much happened there. It was phenomenal. Yeah.
Huh. So what was growing up again? How many siblings did you have? What was the relationship with your parents like? What was the kind of family dynamic like? For example, for some people we've talked to, get into the parts of like divorced, not divorced parents. We had this many siblings and it was chaos all the time, or we were pretty chill, or everybody was running around playing sports? What was the dynamic kind of like?
So I'm one of two. I have a sister. She's older than me, Melanie. So we grew up just outside of Smiths Falls. Our parents, it was definitely their desire to give us a good life, and also teach us about life. And so we had a pool growing up, and we had before we moved to the lake near Rideau Ferry, they had a boat, and they parked that boat in Portland. And so our family holidays growing up was actually coming to the St. Lawrence and parking in Brockville and Kingston and Thousand Islands. So this is a really weird memory, but like one of my favorite noises is a seagull, because it reminds me of being downtown Kingston or Brockville and like listening to a seagull, and which is obviously a bizarre sound with all the different birds out there. But those were incredible times. My family worked hard. My mom worked in the business as well as soon as I was maybe 2 or 3 years old. So they worked hard. And we played hard for sure. When we were on holidays, my dad, my mom always, but my dad could switch gears like nothing else, and be able to be all in. I don't remember ever him, like I think about myself, but I don't remember him just staring off, just like trying to solve problems about the business. He was able to just be all in when he was home.
Nice.
But he was growing, my dad was growing the business. And so he took appointment, when we were doing household movings, he would do sales estimates at night. So it was quality time when he was home, and my mom home. So I would say relationship was very good. I would say the one thing that was that I didn't come to appreciate my sister until I grew up a bit, until I matured. We just were different. And there was a certain point, probably the entrance of high school, or maybe even before that, where we were very, very separate, even though our rooms were beside each other. So I don't know if it was mutual, but for me, I lacked appreciating and respecting her. I was definitely on the Jordi journey, and the path to more sports, more popularity, more fun, more me. So obviously that was a major contributing factor. I mentioned a little bit about my parents, but looking back, their goal was to help us have fun and develop, and they gave us lots of opportunities, both from a recreational standpoint in sports. I got to do what my dad wasn't allowed to do, as well as his friends, was play hockey. And him growing up, there was really no competitive sports opportunity. It had a little bit to do with like the church that they went to and what the priorities were of the family, in the sphere that he was in. Same with my mom as well. And so they gave us sports. My sister and I played hockey, and remember so much time on the road and tournaments, and that was they really gave that as a gift. They gave us a lot of gifts. The other gift they gave us was like I said, was affirming your kid in the strengths. They didn't have many critical feedback moments for me. Maybe that's where confidence comes from, when you don't get lots of critical feedback. So I have a unique upbringing, and my parents' personality is such that I never saw them fight. I never saw an argument. I didn't know what it was like. I never knew what it was like to worry about the status of the family. And just kind of an interesting side note, I looked up to my dad. I still look up to my dad, and that's never changed. There was probably a time in my 20s where I thought I knew more than him, and maybe I relapsed again in my 30s where I thought that I knew more than him. But one of the things that was interesting was selfish Jordi used to get very mad at generous Terry, and selfish Jordi could see the world from his perspective, like what he gets. And my dad saw this whole other realm of being generous with the things that you've been entrusted with. And my folks were the same at work, at home, and at church. And that's a gift in itself, just to have like consistency of what character looks like. Because once you see good character and you see it across different realms or different spaces, you know what good character is, and that bar is set in your heart, and you will pursue that. You'll pursue that, or you will run far away from it. So when that bar was set about character, how they treated me, watching them treat an employee, watching them treat like all these people, it wasn't like my parents were rock stars at work and at church and then they treated us poorly. Yeah, very, 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 very special couple. It's interesting though, like not seeing them fight at all. Also feeling a bit of shame when you fight with your wife. You know, I had to work through that in the first little bit too as well, because like my wife and I come to our kids and we're like, Mom and Dad were upset there, and we want to talk about that. So, you know, we talk about it. So fairly different for both my wife and I and what we saw. But still, my folks gave us a lot of gifts. Anyways, going back to the part about selfish Jordi, generous Terry, and Heather, Heather being my mom, is that they would lend our stuff away. So like we had a Sea-Doo and a boat and Skidoo and stuff like that, and they would lend it away. And I hated it. I was like, they're going to break it. They don't deserve. I just like in my mind, I was thinking that it was mine, and like looking at my dad, he responded to me a few times. He's like, Jord, we have the ability to share these things. We're going to share it. It's interesting though, is like a young teen is like being angry that people are.
It's like I love. Have you ever heard Shaq talk about this with his kids, where the kid says something about. It comes out that he's like, yeah, Daddy, we're rich. And Shaq basically turns and he's like, kid, I'm rich. You ain't rich. He's like, you're entitled. Like I've earned this.
Right.
But like, it is funny because there's a point somewhere in your childhood and teenage years where it's like what your parents have, you think you're fully entitled. Yeah. Like to have an opinion on it.
Have an opinion, the life, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, my folks probably could have had a few chats with me about that, but they really chose the positive path. I can't emphasize that enough. So,
I guess you kind of mentioned it a bit, but do you wish you had a bit more of that tough love in those stages of life?
It's hard to say. Yeah. I think the gift of affirming love and security, sets you up in a good position to figure out some more life stuff later. So it's interesting, like now being president and an owner is how much I'm thinking about the business, and my capacity is a little bit limited right now for home and really thinking about, but it's okay. And my wife picks up some of that slack, but thinking back to my parents and growing the business and where my dad's like headspace would have been at to grow the business. So, generous Terry lends stuff. Jordy's upset. But I also see something that I don't have, which is joy, and I don't have joy. And I knew that. I could see it on my dad's face, when we had those conversations, and you can't articulate that when you're young, but you know that you know that you'd rather not be resentful and grumpy and selfish. You'd rather be that guy. And so I think that started a curiosity for me for why he has joy. And he's unashamed to say that it comes from faith and this idea that these aren't our things. So we're going to be generous and give them away because we've been entrusted to them and we have the ability to bless people and make their day. So we're going to do that. So I think that started something in me, Mitch, that said that I don't have it fully figured out yet because I don't have joy, and I want it because I don't want. So, anyways, that's a little bit about the upbringing.
What part of, like you're saying in current day right now you don't have the joy in that, like, or is that
was past
you? So then, how did you get from that to having joy now?
Well, I think some of the things that I've mentioned, but the identity crisis, leaving high school and figuring out, well, if life's not about being liked and known, respected, then what's it about? And that's when I started that's when I started, I would say, a faith journey as a 19-year-old, was figuring out if those things, like money can never turn back, popularity, money, respect, they can never like turn around and say to you in the lowest of times, I love you, you're worth it, you're amazing, you have value. They do not do those things. But I was learning about and discovering who does. And so that is the person of Jesus. And so when I was dealing with craving and wanting respect, what I found from a logic perspective within the Christian faith was that God showed ultimate respect and ultimate worth, that we were something of value, that he was willing to give something so valuable to him so we could have that relationship, so we could have that security. So really that sort of logic made sense to me. Was like, okay, God was really willing to put the thing that was most important on the table, so that we could have a restored relationship with him. And so that was huge. And that happened when I was 19, when I was away. I didn't want to live for what people thought of me. And then, as I mentioned, I went to Carleton University and I was mentored on all things. Like, we talked about relationships. We talked about how we spend our time. We talked about healthy friendships, money, everything. Like, we talked about all these things, and you're figuring out as a young adult. So I would say through those many, many events and more, starting to discover purpose and joy, and where it comes from. Nice. So yeah, a long journey.
So how then, all these things, childhood, your journey through university, all that stuff, how do you deploy in Will's Transfer today emotional intelligence and all those things into your business, and why is that important?
Previous to coming to Will's, I worked with Power to Change Christian movement. Big emphasis on training, and I think that would be the number one thing that I brought over. Was we were invested in, so let's invest in our people. And when I came back to the business and started talking about doing more training, my dad, Terry, just gave me like the full green light on anything. And so we started, I think, something to do with investing in people. And you don't always hit the head on the nail in terms of how practical it is for their job, but the act of investing in someone, helping someone get out of their busy day-to-day to get training, is just as powerful, can be just as powerful as the actual content being shared. Now, the content being shared is, it can be anything from how to work as a team, building trust, being a resilient person, being open to feedback, how to affirm your team, living with intention, like, a huge piece. And then there's also a supply chain logistics piece, but we end up actually spending more time on people stuff, quite a bit more, like 80-20, 20% on growing as a logistician. So I didn't mention, but so Will's Transfer, we're like at the heart of the supply chain in Canada, in that we're working with manufacturing companies, some drilling companies, some oil and lubricant companies, pharmaceutical and food. So these are kind of our main industries. And what we're doing for them is we're giving them the ability to flex up and down with their inventory. So that could be a raw materials that they need for production, or it could be a finished good that is to be sold. And so we play this flexible warehouse space, and we're in the space so that they don't have to go and rent and buy a warehouse every time that their inventory fluctuates up and down. Manufacturing, food and beverage, these large industries in Canada, they have to have X amount of raw materials, X amount of finished goods to be able to produce, produce at a really good rate. And then also, if sales do pick up, they need to be able to fulfill those sales. And so those two things are going like this in Canada all the time in different industries. So we're like really in the heart of that in the Canadian supply chain, in being a flexible warehouse partner for them. So we love what we do. We get to work with companies that are bigger and in some cases better in areas than us. And we have to, every time we bring on a new large customer, we have to up our game. We have to get our people around what this company is about and why we're doing business with them. We have to understand what's important to that company and what their goals are, and then how Will's Transfer is helping them with their goals. We got to provide that to our team. We got to teach them on the processes so that we end up shipping on time, in full, every time. And so there's a lot that has to happen. But every time we bring on a new customer, we have to up our game, because they are going to hold us. They are going to hold us to standards and expectations that it's going to make us better. So our top 10 clients have all made our company what it is today better. And I think like Terry and I, we aren't master logisticians at all. We're not engineers. We don't have trademark racking and storage solutions. We're not giving that great technical leadership on where the future is going from a data perspective and digital perspective. Terry and I are not, which is interesting, because some people start a business and they are highly technical and they do very well. We are building teams. We are maintaining great relationships with customers, and your teams are fulfilling on those technical pieces and those operational pieces. So just kind of an interesting business model, whereas Terry and I have made more of an investment in people and customers, and our team is stepping up and delivering on what that customer exactly. Yeah. So there's people in our company that are much more both technical for the IT side of running a warehouse, because the IT, like 2019, 2020, the things just started to ramp up from an expectation of where your data is, what your data what story it needs to tell to you as a company and your customer in terms of trends for their inventory, as well as the ability to scan. If I go out, if I'm receiving a load that's coming into our warehouse and I have to write down every number, like, I'm out. I can't be in that business. Like, it has to be, if anything, I'd like there to be, scanners that are actually scanning it on the way in, so we don't even have to stop to scan it, right? There has to be so much automation to be successful in this business in the future. And I'm not providing the leadership, but I hope to support that leadership, if that makes sense. Yeah. And same on the operations side. So where were we?
Well, we can move into the part that I'm also interested in with this is how does the dynamic of working with your dad and all of this look from kind of beginning to now you're fulfilling his role,
right?
But what is that dynamic, both the good and the bad, because working with family is not an easy thing to do all the time.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, somewhere there's a lot of unspokens with my dad, and that's not a negative thing, but I think one of his unspokens was that he was very, very, very committed to making this work. And he set me up for success, I think, in every area. So one of those areas was his own attitude about how he's going to manage me. And he never came out and said this, but basically he gave me tons of rein. And he led with such a good example that I wanted to lead like him. I wanted to have the same, what I saw happening, I wanted the same thing. He had respect of people in the community at work and customers. And so I wanted that. So there's a lot that he didn't have to say to me, but the bar was set high in a good way. By the way, I did go through a time, I think leading before I took over, I don't feel it today, but there was definitely a time where I was very concerned about comparison, right? Because people had such a good experience with Terry. That you couldn't help. It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to think about comparison. Okay, well, how are they? What if I'm not like this? Whatever. And I'm feeling like probably the most comfortable with my leadership style. Not that it's perfect. Like, it's still developing. I feel most comfortable now. And Terry also did a really good job of freeing me to appreciate how I was built. And I don't know if you ever had this before, but there's some people that are really close to you that it's hard to actually affirm them. And, even sometimes I actually had a hard time doing that because he was so generous with, if he saw something, he would say it and affirm it. And that is a very, first of all, you can do it one time, but then to do it on a consistent basis over 11 years working closely together, and not just do it when you feel like things aren't good, right? If you feel something's not good with the relationship, you may go into like management mode of that relationship. No, he was doing it like even at the peak of time. He never did it as I never felt manipulated, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I never felt that I was being led on to, in terms of taking over. Every time we did extend the succession date, 2 or 3 times, but each time he made sure that that we had mutual buy-in for that, so that we weren't in a position where I resented the fact that the ball was being kicked down the road because he just wanted to keep working. Yeah. I will say this though, this was funny. So I just had a busy stint working in Brockville for 2.5 years, and I was fatigued a bit, probably more so than any other time in my career. And I was continuing to try and get leaders in training. So I was very much pushing training, but then I hadn't done anything for myself, and I felt like a bit of a hypocrite like that. Plus I was feeling a bit spent. So I'm like looking for courses. COVID had just finished. I knew that I didn't want to be online. I knew I needed something in person. And then like 10 minutes into my search, this ad for an executive MBA come up. And like, honestly, like 2 days later, I'm applying. 3 days later, I'm finishing up my resume. 4 days later, I'm gathering references. Like it happened quick.
Wow.
But I talked with Terry and my wife Heidi, and they were both like, in different conversations, they're both like, yes, you should do this now. Like no hesitation. So it's like, oh, maybe this is the time. Even though I'd never really thought about doing one before. Yeah, I just didn't think being a student was in the cards for me academically. Again. Anyways, so my wife's like, yes, this should happen now. Your dad is healthy and happy doing it. And my dad was on board. Now, he was extra happy because what did that do? That allowed him to have a little bit more time, which he actually wanted, and I was good with.
Yep.
It did make. So I started in 2022. I finished in 2023. It did make it hard. I was very antsy to get into the seat. Not because of anything that Terry was doing. I just like when you're just ready, you're ready, and I'm unashamed of that. Like I just felt ready to rock. But we had to trust the timeline, which was finish school, regroup, regroup, and then do it. So, but man, it was the most. That was going back to the start of our conversation was when I got feedback. Like November, I was antsy. I had that executive MBA pace, both in school, but also with colleagues. And I was pushing and not forcing things, self-awareness, not sure. I was pushing and my mind would not stop. And I wasn't, I don't think I was angry, but it definitely wasn't fun. So we were talking about the piece with the succession. So one of the gifts he gave me was affirming, not just in the high and low times, but just consistently. And that's an amazing leadership piece. If you can consistently affirm your team, right? Not just when you think the team needs it. Oh man, the team needs it right now. I better say some nice stuff. It's like, no, can you say it when things are good and nobody needs to hear it? Can you say it? And that takes a lot, and that takes humility. I really think at the end of the day, to be able to affirm someone takes humility if you're going to do it sincerely and accurately. The next thing was just watching years and years of interactions with people and trying to find a win-win, just committed to finding a win-win, listening to people. I would say I would say on the spectrum, he showed a lot of mercy and kindness, and that works really well if you also have people on your team that can help deliver the expectation of how things. Okay, so we had this problem, we had this situation. I affirm and accept you. Thanks for telling me, or whatever the situation was. But you do also need people that are going to make that person deliver. Mm-hmm. Right? So they work well. Like he couldn't have had that attitude and approach with employees and customers, and also have been like right in the operations at like a supervisor level, because people still need to deliver and meet the expectations of the day. So those two play nicely. The person is affirmed, and they've been we've dealt with them what we think as fairly, and hopefully even more fairly. They come back into the business and that expectation continues to be there. With customers and with community people, he was just, I would call him just a bridge builder, just constantly building bridges everywhere he went, even if it didn't mean a sale for him. Like he just kept the horizons open and built bridges. And again, a son is a really good judge of his father's character, and never for the sake of what can I get from this person. And that, like I said, that's an amazing standard to watch growing up. It's like you see your father building bridges. Sometimes those conversations went business. Sometimes they went family. Sometimes they went faith. Sometimes they went crisis. They went all different sorts of ways. But when I working with Terry for the last 11 years, you hear he tells you about something going on with someone, an employee, a friend, a community person, and that person has come to talk to him because at some point he had built trust with that person. And that could have been something 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. Jordi, he was like their dad passed away, and I attended the funeral. I remember coming back and sending them a book and writing them a letter. And like 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, they come at a time because of the trust that he had built with them at an important time. So yeah, tons of people stuff that I'm still learning. But those are some of the things that have really set the foundation. And then in 2014, we set that as our overarching value, which is people matter. And it guides a lot of conversations when people matter. It guides a lot of conversations for your senior team when they believe in that, because we can put stuff through the filter. So you're in a management meeting and somebody reminds you that people matter. Yes, that's a generic statement, but we also now have to make sure that we're thinking that way on this problem.
But that's kind of in a company, the vision and mission statement, right? That's kind of what it's supposed to be, is that when problems come up, you refer back to those as like, okay, how does that actually align with our vision and mission in the company, right? Right. And a lot of companies, I don't think, do a good job of that. So that's cool that internally you guys are actually implementing that, because I think a lot of companies have mission and vision statements, but then don't come back to, well, what's the purpose and goal of why we're actually doing this? Because at the end of the day, is it about, for you guys, the people, or is it about making your next X amount of dollars you got to fulfill? Yeah. So it's a tough one.
Yeah. It's made a good guiding principle. I think it's actually helped us keep culture while growing. It's really helped us, I would say, keep culture while growing. So we're at 197 employees. A lot of that growth has been in the last 10 years. We closed our moving division, and that was such a turning point for the company, because the moving division was tough. It had declining profits. It was seasonal. Most people moved in the summer. It in many cases was sometimes unsafe for our people, like a WSIB case. We had a high volume of that because people are on and off the trucks lifting heavy stuff. There were so many factors, but it was emotional for my dad because he had grown that business and he had done very well at it. So it was a hard decision, but it was the best decision. And we look back all the time, we're reflecting. We were joking about it this week about what it'd be like to be gearing up for the summer. Like, we talk about it all the time. And we're very thankful that we have the right people around to encourage us to do that and nudge us. But it made us ask the question, who are we if we're not a moving company? Because that's what we were most associated with. We had done a number of things, U.S. freight, something called intermodal. We had done these different things over the years, but we were most known as a moving company. So we had an identity crisis when that happened, and probably the best kind of identity crisis, which just made us ask the question, if we're not a family moving business, who are we? So we're what we believe is a world-class supply chain company, providing innovative logistics solutions and trying to make our customers successful. So if we can help the 3Ms of the world and the Shell lubricants of the world and other clients, if we can help them be successful in the Canadian market specifically, helping them make sure their products delivered on time and full, and we help them keep their costs down. So, and our people, I would say a lot of our people know that we're in it to make our customers successful. We're successful when they're successful. So we talk about it a lot. So in my first course, in my MBA program. It's called the role of the general manager. And essentially it's this, the role of the general manager, they wear many hats, as you do in your business. But the hat that is most important is to drive vision, like strategy and vision, because no one else will care about it. Like one person has to really pound the table and push it, remind people, and drive it. Yeah. And it's not that these people aren't able to do that, but they're dialed in on their, they will contribute to thoughts about that, but they won't. No, there has to be a single owner of vision and strategy in terms of pushing it. So it was like, I just paid this large fee for this MBA program, and I'm now in my first class. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I see what my future is. My future is taking those values and where we want to go, and being the person to remind our people of where we're going and how we're going to get there. Even though I don't have all the details, and I don't have all the details fleshed out. I'm a few months fully into that position. So
no one ever fully figures it out.
No
anyways,
one ever fully.
Which is,
I actually felt, Mitch, a pretty intense pressure to be able to, like, picturing myself having a town hall and being able to say, thanks for accepting me as the next president. I'm very honored. Here's where we're headed. And that part, here's where we're headed, I wanted to have figured out on day one, but I've given myself, I've redirected that path of exploration and thinking. So it's good. I don't feel that pressure anymore, but I did.
Yeah. I'll bet. Question. I got kind of two more for you. One of them is, in your role now as president, looking back from the childhood stuff you've talked about, again, high school, all these different components that have got you contextually to where you are today, how do you perceive failure at the level, like in a company that has, what you said, 197?
Yep.
Yeah. So with a company that large, how do you perceive failure in whatever aspect that means to you?
Number one, I think it's important for the leader to express, I felt failure in this area. What you'll notice is your team will come right around and say, no, that's not failure. And that's okay, because they don't. That's a strong word. Failure is a strong word. On the individual level, though, Mitch, we do feel these glimpses, moments, and even significant moments of failure. So usually what I like to do is write it out. Like, I had so much on my mind in December, and in January I started writing out some things. Like, if I felt worried, anxious, failure, I started to write those out. So what works best for me is, when I do personality surveys, I'm always on, like, the feeler. I'm a feeler. I experience things in the moment. So when I've done personality tests, I rank high for basically feeler. And so I basically want to live by my gut. I can be easily influenced. If you were to tell me about an opportunity right now and you're excited about it, I'd be like, let's go right now. So knowing that about myself as a leader, and specifically the MBA journey helped me as well to be a fact-based feeling leader. And so if I feel failure in a work relationship, I will try and write out the facts, how I see them. Now, that's how I see it. I will try and write out how I felt the history of us and what I've been involved in, why they think they're feeling that way. So I just try and get a bit factual and write out all the stuff. Because as you're writing it, you'll realize, oh, that's totally an emotional thing. And the thing with leadership is that, and I've had it already happen to me a few times this year, is one event and then a second event and then a third event happens, not related. They feel related, and it feels like you're on a downward trajectory. So you need to pull together your trusted team. And I would say I'm blessed. I have a large team that I can call on, and I can say that feels like failure for these reasons. And they don't judge me. But anyways, I feel like I've got some really good people to be able to talk to about that, because it happened a week or two ago. And I called two people and just said, this event happened, this event, this is how I'm feeling. So talk to people and write out the facts as best you can. And in that process of writing out the facts, as you see the situation or relationship, you begin to see okay, that one there is a bit irrational of a thought. So I'm going to put that one over there.
Yep.
And then sometimes that will lead to an action plan, and many times it leads to time. And my dad was very good at giving things time and not trying to go fix them in the moment. Very good at giving things time, because time does a lot for you and for the other person or whatever's going on. Yeah, so that's a big one.
How about failure in the overall business? So, for example, I was listening to a podcast not too long ago where Netflix has like a division where basically they're intentionally trying to fail. If they like measure their fail rate, and if it's not at a certain success or like at a certain percentage of it, it means they're not trying enough crazy, obnoxious things that they think maybe this will work, maybe this won't. And if they're not hitting enough of those targets, they actually go and try 10 other things kind of that they didn't think. It doesn't have to be like that extreme, but in terms of larger business, not necessarily your direct relationships to your employees.
Right.
Will's as a whole, what does the failure model kind of look like?
Okay, that's a good question. I would say we would be, I don't even know yet if we're on our journey of, if we're on a journey yet of, open conversations, dialogue and planning surrounding what happens if it fails and if it's okay to fail. And I wouldn't say that we're there yet. We're very much, I think there's, number one, a strong acceptance for it. That's what I believe, that we don't hold a failure over someone. So first and foremost, how we think about it is number one. Number two, which I said, I don't think we are very far along on our journey for setting up opportunities or discussions for that. I feel like we take some risks, but we're pretty low on the risk scale. Yeah, and number three is we have been growing from a revenue perspective for the last 10 years up until last year. And then we were flat. So I think I personally had to work through, in our team, we had to really work through, this isn't individual failure. This isn't team failure. And then we started together as a team, we probably talked, I wouldn't say too much, but we were definitely close to it on our situation, how we got here, what we're going to do. And essentially our industry is in a recession right now. And we took a growth step right before that. So those two things combined.
Yep.
Made
Perfect
it feel
storm.
Right. And you just have to watch. One of those growth steps was building a warehouse. And you have to watch your thinking on that for why you did it. And thankfully we've got enough senior leaders that knew why we did it and were part of the conversations before, where we can circle back to why we're doing it and where we're headed. So that's good. Because if not, they would say, you're doing it wrong. I told you this was going to work out, right? So we don't take, I would say we're not crazy, take a lot of risks, but we have taken actually some less but large risks.
Awesome.
So that's how, but I think I probably have a little bit more to learn on this idea of welcoming and entertaining failure, and what that looks like from a culture piece within the team. So
fair enough. The last question goes back to kind of what we talked about in the beginning, is for you personally in your life, how do you define success? Like, what does success look like? And like I mentioned as well, a big part of why I have this podcast going is I like learning what other people kind of view success, how they view success in their life. And I think as a overall culture, specifically in North America, success pretty much always comes back to money and possessions. And I don't think that's how most people should measure success in their life. So what does that look like for you in all different components?
All different components. Okay. Yeah. Well, keep me on track here. Okay. So
sure.
I don't go.
Let's hear it.
Number one, like, why am I here? Who am I as a person? Like that core, what does it mean to be human? And I think for me, success is knowing your creator, and putting faith in him, and then from there he defines identity, so I don't have to be defined by people around me. and I can truly be loved, because whether you like to talk about love or being loved, that's what I think our hearts crave, to be accepted and to loved. And I feel that those things are fully fulfilled in the Christian message. So that's number one. Number two, I have heard hundreds of stories of broken families where work has been cherished more than family. And I was just at this men's event a few weeks ago, and basically everyone around the table except for one in a broken family situation.
Oh, wow.
Not necessarily work, but like that, that whether it's the divorce rate or just poor relationships with kids, my commitment is that my kids wouldn't resent me because I'm involved in extracurriculars, church, and work. Like the day that they resent those things, they'll be bothered by it. And while I was in school, I had two kids that were very frustrated with me, and the others probably were too, but two of them really vocalized how they felt about me and my time. Thankfully, I have an amazing partner who was on board with why we were doing it, so our messaging was the same. Anyways, so I really want to have relationships with my kids, and in toddler, preteen, teen, I want to have all along the way. And I know that happens not by fluke. It happens by being in the moment, being invested, finding out how they're doing, rising above some of the conversations. Like I've got kids who are feeling big emotions right now, and you can't get lost in those conversations. You do have to rise above and affirm them and tell them what's acceptable and what's not in the home. So that's success. And I want to, Heidi and I use the term being each other's best friend, and that's more of like a concept to go back to. It's like, are each other's best friend right now? And that makes you think of a few things. It's not just a yes or no question. It's like, what's the idea of a best friend? It's like, yeah, you're number one, best friend. We're best friends. Sometimes we say that too, or like best friends. You know what I mean? So
grit of the teeth.
Yeah. And I've seen some couples that are very close to us. When their kids left, it was a tough transition because maybe that couple's identity was in their kids and their kids' activities. I do want to have my best friend during these busiest years, and then in these later years. For the company, I would define success as growing. I want to leave the business in better shape than when I got here, and it was in pretty good shape when I got here. And I want to leave it in better shape. I do feel for many reasons that we have an opportunity to grow, and charting that out, have to figure that out. But if we just grew and didn't add the Wills culture, then that would be a failure for me, because then we would just be buying a company and whatever. So I think one of the things that drew me, Mitch, to the business was in my first few months in the business, I still actually wasn't sure if I was fully committed or not. But I realized that a CEO or a president can really influence not just the individual, but their family. And there's like this this whole kind of sphere of the employee. So it's so much more than just the employee's life. Like having a place where you're respected, meaningful work, getting feedback about how we're making the customer successful. There's all these like components that you can influence as the president. And so if we were to grow, I'd want to do it in a way such that the employees still felt all those things that I just mentioned. So those are some of the things that are successful.
Love it.
And I have a dog, Ruby, and success with Ruby would be that she gets walked at least once or twice a week. That's
nice.
Success. Yeah, she's got a rough life right now with my wife working, and she looks so sad on the couch some days. So
that's funny.
Just that she'd have a full life.
Yes. Very good. I'm going to ask a personal, now selfish question then. So I lied. There wasn't two questions, but going back to your successful family definition there, you mentioned that you and your wife had the same messaging of kind of why you were spending more hours at work or whatever, right? I will, in the next couple of days, hopefully be a first-time father, which is super exciting.
That's awesome.
Within that, what advice would you give to me going into that as like I love work, and I'm very intentional. Same thing when I got married. Well, when I started up the company, my wife and I had a conversation about this where she was a little bit worried about how much I was working, but she wasn't living in Brockville yet. And I was literally working till 2 a.m. I'd wake up at 5 or 6 and just start and get going, and I'd work for ever for weeks on end. Then we had that conversation, and it kind of, I just hadn't made a good, clear communication of I'm doing this now because I can. But once we're married, the goal is like 6 o'clock every day. I will be fully done.
Right.
And I mean, there's obviously days where that doesn't quite fully happen.
Right.
But now we're going into this next chapter where it's like within that, I have all these other dreams and things I want to do in the business, both here and with other businesses I want to start up.
Right.
What advice then would you give with like both with your partner on that, having clear, concise messaging, and also not getting drawn too much into the work side of things?
Yeah. So here's what I would suggest is, I've been in your office. I see your whiteboard. I know that you are focused and driven, and you will have to, I think you will have to become even more focused and a slight redefinition of success. So success is growing the business and a number of things that you've targeted this year to do. So show your wife your definition of success for work and family, so that she can see that this is success. And I think the focus part will be like, there are some things that you either are not going to be able to get at, or you can get someone else to do. And so I would agree with you with the 6 o'clock, 5:30, if better. And there will be some, and when I used to go up the steps to go into my home, I would hear on things on the other side of the door, and sometimes they didn't sound pretty. And I did take a moment to pray. I took some deep breaths.
Yep.
And I said that I had someone share to me that they like to give their best to home, but we tend to give our best to work. And so, yeah, just have that little conversation with yourself about what you're going into. But it will be challenging. Just bring your wife in on as many like big picture conversations as you can. One of the things that's worked for Heidi and I is I tell her I'm going to cram one day, and it's just going to be like an all evening, so she knows about it, and she knows why we're doing it. So to have scheduled, but to not really vary from that schedule very much. But probably what makes things really hard is if it's 5 or 5:30 and you're saying I think I need to stay in it, and then that happens a few times, that will just be hard for them to plan. And then the third thing is it completely changes your family. So just like let those expectations go about what you can accomplish in a day. You're going to accomplish so much less.
Yep.
It's unbelievable, man. Driving down the 401 and like we had to stop 3 times to go to Toronto. It's just like if you define success with the sort of agenda you run in a day, it will be tough. And so it's like, okay, this is new territory here. Success actually is making sure checking in with my wife, making sure she's okay, and just trying to go with the flow. I still remember having to change the kid like on the trunk of the car, and just being like, this is such a slow way to get from Guelph to Smith Falls, but this is our new life now. So let me enjoy this moment, because I'm here. To be a grumpy dad here, this way I'm here. So let me figure out how to get my head around and see if I can make this fun. So yeah, those are some things. But
awesome.
And bringing your wife in on some of the conversations about success and goals in the company, even though her mind is going to be other places, she will take some of that away. May not process it in the same speed but you know what I mean? Like, yeah, she'll take that away and think about that you're bringing these stuff to her, even though she's maybe exhausted or maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, probably
will be. It'll be a different change of pace for us,
boy or girl,
but we're not sure. Keeping
awesome.
A surprise.
Surprise. We had a surprise for number 1. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for letting me talk a lot.
No, it's great. That's what it's all about, man. Yeah. Bring guests in, let them tell their stories. So thanks very much for sharing.
This was great. Thanks, Mitch.
Cool.